Martin is the co-founder of the Massachusetts Right to Know and the Citizens for GMO Labeling. It's a national nonprofit group, and he's using his degree in biotechnology genetics from Worcester Polytechnic Institute in order to advocate a common sense transparency in food labeling and sustainable food production. A longtime advocate for social and environmental justice, he spends time being and growing and making medicine, homesteading, and connecting with allies towards cultural renegotiation and natural reconnection. Thank you, Martin, for coming. It was wonderful to have dinner with him last night and to hear his story about what he's doing with his family. So come and tell us what's going on in Massachusetts.
And let's keep it going. A round of applause for Slow Food Martha's Vineyard and this incredible event that they pulled together here. Thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here. And so as many of you may be aware, the issue of GMO labeling has gained unprecedented attention in recent months. There have been several victories at the state level to pass mandatory GMO labeling. In 2013, both Connecticut and Maine passed GMO labeling, contingent upon neighboring states passing similar legislation before they take effect. Last May, Governor Shumlin in Vermont signed into law the first no-strings-attached GMO labeling law set to go into effect July 1st, 2016. Now, of course, the state of Vermont is being sued by the Grocery Manufacturers Association, which represents Monsanto and 300 or so other chemical and junk food manufacturers. And so all eyes are on them to see if democracy prevails. But we also have labeling initiatives in more than half of the states across the country. And polls by major news organizations consistently show that the broad majority of consumers and residents in the United States want to know if they're eating genetically engineered foods. We want the same right that people in 64 other countries already have, the ability to opt out of the GMO food experiment. Now, in response to the increase in awareness and demand for transparency in food labeling, the chemical manufacturers and junk food companies, which benefit unfairly from a lack of transparency in the food economy, are directing an unprecedented amount of resources towards spreading misinformation in an effort to confuse voters and to confuse legislators and to influence the democratic process. Fortunately, our state legislators in Massachusetts and in other areas in the region have the opportunity to honor the will of the people and to pass mandatory GMO labeling. But unless we have a critical mass of state action on this, unless we have a critical number of states to set the standard for mandatory GMO labeling, the basic human right of food choice may be rendered obsolete. My name is Martin Dagoberto, and as you heard, I actually did get my degree in biotechnology and genetics. Before I became an advocate for food labeling and sustainable agriculture, I was quite enamored with the possibilities for biotechnology, and I have to say, I still am. I do think that there are some significant promises for the technology in theory. But as we see it being implemented in practice, we have no shortage of concerns and reasons that we would want to avoid purchasing genetically engineered foods. In the course of my studies, getting my degree in biotechnology and genetics, I like to say I gained an appreciation for the magnitude of risks that we're taking with genetic engineering. And the more research I did into how these products are being put into our food supply, the more I understood that there is a significant lack of transparency and independent testing, and that while I am not anti-science, I know that I don't want to be a science experiment. And while I don't consider myself anti-GMO, I don't think it's a conflict to wear this button that says no GMO, and to say that, in my opinion, the currently commercialized GMO crops need to be pulled from the market, need to be put through the proper third-party, independent, peer-reviewed clinical feeding trials, because we simply haven't had that. So a couple years ago, I met up with a fourth-generation farmer in Western Mass, Ed Stockman, and we co-founded Massachusetts Right to Know GMOs. That's a statewide network of safe food and consumer advocates that are organizing to increase awareness of the health and environmental risks associated with genetically engineered crops and to support mandatory GMO labeling. Working off the victories in Connecticut as the first state to pass GMO labeling, myself and a few other national organizers co-founded Citizens for GMO Labeling, which is a 501c4, which is a nonprofit that can lobby. There's a whole bunch of C's, actually. And we're set up to direct professional support, training, and resources to grassroots GMO labeling initiatives and GMO awareness groups like Slow Food Martha's Vineyard. And I do have to say, it's quite good to be here and quite refreshing to hear about all the incredible, good food activism, as I like to call it, that's happening here on the island. And I'm curious, how many farmers are here at this farmers brunch? Got a few farmers. How about gardeners and people who like to get their hands dirty and all that? Great. So we have a lot of people here who are interested, who are in practice in getting reconnected to the soil, reconnected to the seed, reconnected to where our food is coming from, and that's, to me, the most important trend that I see happening in the food movement is a greater attention to where our food is coming from, and of course where our waste is going, our waste. And so it is part of an important trend that I'm very excited to be part of. So today Americans are already eating their weight and more in genetically engineered foods. Okay, and that amount is set to increase. Now, it's important to note that our government does not perform or require independent safety testing of new genetically engineered crops. In fact, they simply invite the chemical manufacturers to submit a letter saying that they haven't found any problems with their products. That's the extent of the safety testing that the FDA requires. So it's a voluntary procedure. Now, many of these products are subject to patents, intellectual property rights, that makes independent research impossible, if not, illegal. And the fact is, while we can't prove that GMOs are causing, X, Y, and Z conditions that we'll get into in a minute, there is, in fact, a growing body of evidence linking the consumption of genetically engineered foods to such things as faulty insulin regulation, immune problems, infertility, and multiple types of cancer. And while these studies merit further research, in the meantime, people are simply declaring their right to know and their need to know what they're feeding their families, because people want to opt out of the GMO food experiment. And without labeling, they don't have that choice. And without labeling and tracking, public health officials have no way of linking the consumption of GMOs to possible impacts on public health. It's important to point out that GMO labeling is an economic justice issue, because everyone should have the right to know what they're eating, not just those that are able to shop at the farmer's market or have access to organic food. Whether you're shopping at Whole Foods or the local corner store, you should be able to pick up what you're planning to buy and know what you're feeding your family. And as demand for non-GMO ingredients increases, the availability of non-GMO foods increases, the price comes down, and there are more options for people. So this is a very important aspect of GMO labeling that often gets overlooked. Parents trying to keep their food-sensitive kids healthy need to know if there are potential allergens in their foods. If people want the school lunch to disclose these things, we need to have tracking and labeling so that they have that information. The fact is that there are converging lines of evidence that suggest that GMOs could be linked to the increase in food allergies. The FDA's own scientists had expressed these concerns. GMO labeling is about protecting the free market. It really comes down to having a choice, giving consumers the ability to determine what our food system looks like and to prevent a global monopoly of our seed stock. It allows consumers to decide if they want to support the arguably reckless practices of these aspects of industrial agriculture, some of which you've already heard today and a few which I'd like to summarize and reiterate now. GMO labeling is one immediate step toward a more informed, transparent, and functional free market. So let's talk about intellectual property for a minute. Genetic engineering is first and foremost a way to gain intellectual property over our common genetic heritage. It's a way for companies to take the products of generations of careful cultivation of seeds and soil, the output of generations of traditional breeding, to take that, to modify it in the lab, and then to gain intellectual property over that genetic material. And they've been using genetic engineering as a way to commodify the world's seeds. The biotech giants have been able to maximize their profits by eliminating farmers' rights to save seeds, by reducing choices, and by having control over the prices. The fact is that I believe the figure is 82%. Someone may have a more up-to-date figure. 82% of the global seed supply is held by a handful of corporations that they've been privatized and commodified. And they've started with the major commodity crops as a way to gain a foothold in our agriculture. The latest USDA data tells us that 95% of the sugar beets, 94% of the soybeans, and 93% of the corn grown in the United States is genetically engineered. And the two broad categories, really quick, are herbicide tolerance and the production of their own pesticides, so that in every bite and every cell it's producing that Bt toxin that you heard about. And many times it does both of those things. But the issue of GMO labeling is only going to become more important as there are quite a few GMO crops in the pipeline. Currently, there are those big 9, but let me read you a list of the few that are currently in production. Apples, Arctic apples you probably heard about. Barley, bell peppers, cabbage, carrots, cauliflower, cherries, chili peppers, coffee, cranberries, cucumber, flax, grapefruit, kiwi, lentils, lettuce, melons, mustard, oats, olives, onions, peanuts, pears, peas, persimmons, pineapple, popcorn, radishes, strawberries, sugarcane, sunflower, sweet potatoes, tomatoes, walnuts, and watercress. These are the 30 that are coming next on the pipeline that we know about, okay? Yeah, let that sink in for a second. The fact is, though, without labeling and without tracking, we're not going to have a way to monitor potential impacts on public health, and we're not going to be able to keep it non-GMO agriculture safe from cross-contamination. Without that information, we have no way of linking the consumption of GMOs to potential acute or chronic public health effects, the many unexplained health problems that are facing our country today. You know, the industry likes to say that, you know, we've eaten 1 trillion meals and we haven't seen any problems with it. Well, we aren't looking. We don't have that information. Now, according to internal memos from the Food and Drug Administration that were released as part of a lawsuit, the FDA's own scientists had expressed concerns over the unintentional introduction of allergens, toxins, and other consequences of genetic engineering. Of course, these concerns were whitewashed by FDA administrators, including former Vice President of Monsanto, Michael Taylor, who I would point out was appointed the FDA food safety czar by our current president. But this is about more than just personal health concerns, okay? Consumers have no shortage of reasons why they want to avoid supporting GMO agriculture and its associated risks. So I'll just try to summarize quickly a few of them here. The chemical treadmill that farmers are locked into when they buy into the GMO model, these are chemical companies that are now in life sciences, okay? The GMOs that are currently commercialized are delivery vehicles for herbicides and pesticides. And herbicide-tolerant crop technology has in fact led to, from 96 to 2011, it has led to a 527 million pound increase in herbicides, GMO-related herbicides. And by the way, for each fact that I'm dropping here, I have a handout on my table with full citations. There's about 30 citations there for you, so please do check that out. So we've seen, as we heard, we've seen a widespread overuse of glyphosate, Roundup, and other GMO-associated herbicides that have seen a dramatic increase in what are being called superweeds and superbugs, such that half of the acreage in the U.S. now, conventional acreage now has herbicide-tolerant weeds that are emerging. And this is putting people on the track to use ever more toxic compounds, now moving on to 2,4-D. Anyone heard of 2,4-D? It's the active ingredient in Agent Orange. And the USDA has just approved crops that will withstand applications of 2,4-D. The escalation of herbicide use comes at the expense of soil, plant, and human health, and it undermines our ability for sustainable agriculture. These changes are, of course, favored by the chemical companies. We've heard about GMOs threatening non-GMO agriculture and threatening the biodiversity of the wild cousins and unrelated and related plants. So let me talk about action. There's a few things happening that we need to make sure that you're aware of. So I'll start zoomed out at the global level and come down to the state level. Right now, there are several international free trade agreements which could threaten our national sovereignty. These are aggressive backdoor negotiations which include the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, the Transatlantic Free Trade Agreement, which could very well undermine the ability of governments to protect the public health and the environment. These are being negotiated in full secrecy. Many members of our Congress aren't even aware of the details, but we do have a few insights into what they're doing. And here's a quote from the National Confectioners Association in comments to the U.S. Trade Representative. Quote, U.S. industry also would like to see the U.S.-EU Free Trade Agreement achieve progress in removing mandatory GMO labeling and traceability requirements. They're going to set up a court system so that if a country passes a law that hurts their profits, those companies, elevated to the level of nation states, can sue those nations in an international court system run by the corporations. Okay, so what we need to do is stop something called the fast track, which is a way for the federal government to push these agreements through without any debate or any amendments. Well, if you want to come talk to me afterwards, I can tell you more about it, but we need people to call the Congress people and tell them to stop the fast track and to stop these free trade agreements. At the federal level, we are seeing movement on GMO labeling. Unfortunately, it's in the wrong direction. Representative Pompeo from Kansas has introduced legislation, well, expected to be reintroduced this week, called the DARK Act, Denying Americans' Right to Know, and that would set the standard for voluntary labeling and actually make it illegal for the states or the federal government to require GMO labeling. Fortunately, none of our Massachusetts delegation has signed on to it, but we do need to make sure that they know that this is not the GMO labeling bill we're looking for. And we have materials at our table about that. And I'll close by telling you what's happening in Massachusetts. We're really fortunate to have a widespread movement across the state. We started organizing a couple of years ago. We now have over 325 local businesses, farms, and organizations that have signed on to the campaign to label GMOs. Last session, we generated over 40,000 comments and signatures in support of mandatory GMO labeling in Massachusetts. And just a few weeks ago, a GMO labeling bill was introduced at the State House that received, out of 200 legislators, 154 co-sponsors. It makes it, yeah. It's the most popular bill in the State House right now. There's no other bill that has more co-sponsors right now. Now, of course, unfortunately, having such widespread majority of support doesn't necessarily translate to action. Whether or not it comes up for a vote this session is another question, and that's why we need your help to reach people on the island and off the island and across the state to contact their reps and senator and tell them we want to pass it this session. And again, we have materials on that. You can sign the petition. We need more farms and businesses to sign up as network partners, and we need people to stay tuned to our website and email list for key moments to submit testimony and call their legislators. I will close by saying that even without legislation, we're winning. The market is shifting. Last year, we saw at least a 15% increase in non-GMO food production. The non-GMO verification project has increased exponentially. Hershey's was the latest big company to say they're going non-GMO. The Wall Street Journal says farmers are moving to a non-GMO model to get increase in profits there. And we're seeing it here on the island. We're seeing this great event occur. We're seeing, over 40 farms, part of the Island Grown Initiative, really reconnecting people to their food production. That's a very important part of that reconnection that I think is so important, part of the transformation. We're seeing an increase in demand for non-GMO. We're seeing, with labeling, we're going to see more demand. And we're also going to have a niche market for farms that aren't organic. They're not going through all the hoops for organic standards, but they're not growing GMO. So now they're going to have a niche market where they can sell their non-GMO crops. But really, this all comes down to a free market solution with labeling. We're going to have a more democratic and transparent economy so that consumers can decide what they want to support with their dollars. By demanding mandatory GMO labeling in a free market, citizens across the United States are claiming their freedom to choose whether or not they want GMO food. But until there's labeling, the market cannot work, save for a few very powerful companies which benefit from secrecy and a lack of transparency. It's time to label GMOs. Thanks.